Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle. It's Wednesday, sort of. More about that in a moment. And it is time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. So, as I said just a moment ago, I'm pre-recording this because at the time this goes live, I should be in Turin for the Eurovision Song Contest. Very excited to go. I haven't been, for a couple of years now since it had been canceled and then there were restrictions, but I'm very excited to be there. What sort of made me think of a good topic for this list, which will, of course, air Wednesday at around 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, is I wanted to talk about travel games. As a reminder, in case it's your first time joining us, Wednesday Whimsy is a show that I do every Wednesday night, and we talk about some game topic or a top 10 list or a game review, something like that, for about 20-25 minutes or so. And I hope it's enjoyable to people. Anyway, without further ado, I wanted to get into the topic. So I mentioned travel games. I have here an example of a game that would be a bad travel game, right? This game is huge. It's a good game, but it's huge. It's heavy. It takes up lots of space. There's very little chance of you getting it on the plane, let alone in a suitcase, because it's so large and heavy. Instead, a travel game is going to be something that's generally in a small box, that generally has a small table footprint, and that doesn't have too many pieces to get jostled around and disorganized or broken. Generally, there'll be games with a lower price point so that if something happens to it, well, oh well. And oftentimes, especially for me, a game that works well with a lower player count or that's even solo friendly is a great choice for me when I'm traveling. So I've prepared here today a list of 10 games that I would definitely consider bringing with me anytime I'm traveling. Now, there are a lot of really good games that you can take traveling, and certainly this is not a definitive list, but it's 10 of my favorites that I've traveled with in the past and that I look forward to traveling with again in the future. So let's get started with number 10. All right, my number 10 is a small game, and there's a couple of lines of games, publishers that produce exceptionally nice small games. And the first of these that I wanted to talk about is a company called Oink, and the game is called Insider. Now, Insider, you can see right here, it's just a very tiny box. Let me see if I can share the screen here and see if we can look it up online and see some more pictures of it, because there's not really a whole lot to it. What you're doing in Insider is it's a social deduction type game where most of you are working together. You have one person who's answering questions in a 20 questions style game, although you can ask more than 20, on a timer, and one person who knows the answer who's trying to guide everybody to the right answer, and then everyone else who's trying to get the right answer. And then once you've gotten the right answer, everybody's going to try and identify the person they think knew the answer to begin with, the insider, as it were, and try and identify that person. So if you're the insider, you're trying to be helpful, but not too helpful. It's a great little game. It works really well. The rules are super simple. Doesn't take up any space at all. As long as you speak one of the 3 languages that's on the card, you're able to play. It's just a really good small profile solo game group party game that I really enjoy and would always be willing to travel with. So there you go. That is my number 10, Insider. So let's move on now to my number 9. So my number 9 is not Insider. Let me go back to the top here. My number 9 is a game it's another one of those lines of games that do really small boxes. Now, this game the line is the Tiny Epic series, and my favorite in that series is Tiny Epic Quest. It's a very small profile box. It works really well solo. It works really well with up to 4 players, I guess, because that's how many it can hold. Unlike some of the other Tiny Epic games, it doesn't have a bunch of expansions, so everything fits pretty nicely into that one small box. It does take up a lot of space. Once you unpack it, it's got a bunch of cards that are about that size, but it's a really nice, easy, and engaging game. Let me actually type it here. See, look, you can see there's a lot of these games, but this one again I think is my favorite. So what you're doing in Tiny Epic Quest is you're kind of going on a Legend of Zelda style adventure, and you've got these little meeples. I think this was the first game that had the meeples that hold things, the item meeples, and you're just kind of going around. It's a dice game. There's sort of a day phase and a night phase, and you're rolling dice and trying to accomplish certain goals, and you're also moving around and following each other people as they move, and really just trying to build up the best character you can to have an adventure. It works really well. The rules aren't hard, and it's a great game to play either by yourself or with other people. So it's again a very small box. So again, a great travel game. That is, and again, I would put most of the Tiny Epic series up as a potential here. Now, I will warn you that many of the Tiny Epic series are not very good. Some of them are true gems, like Galaxies and Quest, and others are real duds, like West and Pirates. But your own mileage may vary depending on which theme you like, and maybe you enjoy some of them more than I do. But they're all very small games, which makes them ideal for taking with you on a trip. So there we go. Let's move on to number 8. All right, my number 8 is a game that actually we talked about a few weeks ago when I did my solo list. It's a game that is very small and very compact and great to play solo. I talked about it before, so I won't talk about it too much today, but that is One Deck Dungeon. So One Deck Dungeon, again, is a game where you're going through a dungeon, and the dungeon is comprised of effectively only a deck of cards, plus some small side components. And you're going to go through, you're going to encounter traps or fight monsters, mostly by rolling dice, trying to get certain values in certain colors. And then you're going to use the cards that you've conquered to upgrade either your special abilities, your stats, or give you experience points to increase your overall status in the game. And after you've gone through the deck 3 times, you'll fight a big bad monster, and that's kind of it for the game. It's very short, very fast, very replayable, and a lot of fun. And a lot can be done with just a few dice and a few cards, and it fits into a box which I left in the closet. That's it's about the same size as the Tiny Epic box. It's a little bit taller and a little bit shorter, so very small and easy to take with you. A great game that I have taken with me many times. So that's my number 8, Tiny Epic Quest. Let's move on to number 7. Oops, well, it looks like I already spoiled it without hitting the the video for number 7. So imagine you saw a 7 come up there. My number 7 is a game that's been very popular lately, and this game is called The Crew. I have the under the Mission Deep Sea version. It's a small game. It's a trick-taking game. So it's a card game, and it uses essentially just 2 decks of cards. One for some missions, and one are the cards that you're going to play with. There's a few tokens and other components in there. Hold on, let's go see if we can find it here. Mission Deep Sea, there we go. So what you're doing is you're working together with these cards, and you're trying to accomplish certain missions. You've got four colors, and the cards go from 1 to 9, and then you're going to have a certain number of missions that's going to vary based upon the difficulty level you're playing on, and you're trying to work together with a few other people. I would say 3 or 4 total. You don't really want to play this 2-player. It's not very good, and it's not very solo-friendly, or solo-friendly at all, I guess I should say. But you're trying to work together without communicating to achieve certain goals. Like, I don't know, I'm going to win the trick that has the green 2 in it. And so everybody can see what my goal is, but without then by the cards we play and very limited communication, somebody's going to be able to win that. I was a little bit cool on The Crew early on, but after I've played it a lot, I've seen just how well it works with a lot of people. But I would add here that really any trick-taking game is going to work well as a travel game, especially if you're going to be there with 2 or 3 or 4 people. Trick-taking games are generally very small profile. Usually it's just a deck of cards. The rules are pretty simple. There's not a lot of components. So you could put on here, I thought about, for example, Claim, which is a 2-player trick-taking game, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of others that I've frequently taken with me. Texas Showdown is a great trick-taking game. Any trick-taking game is going to fit well when space is tight and you're looking for something light, fun, and also pretty replayable. So there's my number 7. I'm saying The Crew, but I could realistically go for just about any trick-taking game. So let's move on now with the little cutout video to number 6. All right, my number 6 is another kind of a game that's great and that I love, but it can stand in for a lot of other games. The game that I have picked as my number 6 is one that I've traveled with a lot, and that is Trails of Tucana. So Trails of Tucana, hold on. There you go, and its expansion, is basically a deck of cards and a pad of paper. And everybody's going to have a pad, and you're going to flip over 2 cards, and people are going to draw a line between 2 different hexagons on their map. And you're trying to connect different things. You're trying to make a trail, and it's going to go, and you're going to connect different sites, different objectives, and score points that way. It really is just a few cards and a pad of paper. So as long as you can remember to bring a pen, you can play this with, I don't know what the player count is on it, but it's one of those games where everyone plays simultaneously, so it's really not going to matter that much. I think it might even go up to 5. It's going to be the same sort of game experience regardless of how many people are playing. I do have some experience traveling with this one when I went to the Dice Tower cruise earlier this year. I took it with me, and we played it. 3 of us played it at the airport on my lap, right? I mean, okay, they weren't playing on my lap, but I had the cards in the box and would flip them over and drop them in the box, and then they would sort of draw on their boards, and we played it with literally no space. We were able to play it in a very short amount of time. It's very lightweight, very small, compact. Everything you're looking for in a travel game. It's also lots of fun, so that's also a plus. But again, this is a stand-in for any number of roll and write style games, whether you're flipping a card and drawing a line or writing a number, kind of like in Welcome to the Moon, which I talked about as a solo game, or whether it's one like Ganz schön clever, where you're rolling dice and writing things on a pad. Either way, it's going to be a good fit because they're lightweight. Generally, they accommodate large player counts, usually work solo, and are easy to take with you. So roll and write games in general, but especially probably my favorite one for traveling is Trails of Tucana. And so with that, let's move on to number 5. All right, my number 5 is one that I actually took with me to Eurovision a couple of years ago when it was in Lisbon. It was the first time I'd ever traveled with it, and it worked so well. The people that were kind of traveling with me had never played it before, but really loved it. I ended up giving my copy away and had to buy a new one, but it's just so small and light and replayable. The game is Shards of Infinity. Now, Shards of Infinity borrows heavily from another game called Star Realms or Hero Realms, but they're different, sort of. They have a few differences. Either way, it's a small head-to-head deck building game. You're building a deck of cards. You're buying new cards out of a line. You're going to be using these cards to attack other people and slowly upgrade your own self. You're going to use them to generate different resources to buy new cards, and you're slowly customizing your deck so that you can do a lot of damage to another player. It fits in a very small box, and the rules are super simple. It's very engaging to play. The symbols are not hard. It's just a deck of cards and a couple of trackers so that you can track your life. And once you've reduced other people's life down to 0, well, you win. I do think it's best as a 2-player game, but it works with 3 and 4 as well. We had a great time playing it in Lisbon, and it's been sort of one of my go-to travel games ever since. The other game that it's kind of based on is Star Realms or Hero Realms, And those are both good games too. They actually come in a smaller box initially, but once you add in all of the expansions, they end up being very big, which is why I think I prefer this one for traveling, because it's very much a standalone product. It has a couple of expansions, but they're small, and it just really kind of feels like its own game. So I really enjoy Shards of Infinity. It's one that I'm always looking forward to traveling with, and one that I highly recommend you consider traveling with as well. So with that, let's move on to my number 4. All right, my number 4 is not Shards of Infinity. I gotta remember to close that. It is a game that is one of my favorite games, full stop. And the fact that I can take it with me is even better. So this game is called Blitzkrieg, and I think there might be an exclamation point on the end, but it's a very generic name. You'll see that there are lots. Oh, there we go. The full name is Blitzkrieg World War II in 20 minutes. It has a younger brother called Caesar, sees Rome in 20 minutes, which is equally good. I do think I prefer this one because it's a little bit more, I don't know, kind of feels a little bit more chaotic. Not in a bad way, though, in a way that nothing feels scripted, and so it's a little bit less tense. But what you're doing in this game is one person is, well, at least in the base game, the Axis powers, and the other person is the Allies, and you're kind of doing a tug of war type thing on these tracks. You'll play a token into a spot, and when it can go in either the brown spots or the blue spots, or some of them are for both, and then you're going to move this little red tracker towards your side. If you get to the end, you get some bonuses. You get to close out that conflict and get all of the bonuses. You also get a bonus based upon what space you go on to. Once the spaces in a row are filled up, someone's going to get points. And when you get to a certain number of points, which I think is 25, then that person wins. There's another way to win. You can sort of make it so your opponent can't play. It's very fast. It says 20 minutes, and it really is 20 minutes. Now, I mean, it's not the highest quality components. It kind of has a cheap feel to it. This is one that I wish that like Board Game Geek would make its Geek Up bits for or something, because these would be really nice if they were a bit higher quality. But regardless, it's very light. It's a small box, and there's a lot of replayability here. It's just a ton of fun to play. I have played it at many an airport, on many a hotel floor. It's got a low, small footprint, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. I really like Blitzkrieg, and I highly recommend it as a travel game of choice. But with that, let's move on to number 3. All right, my number 3 is a game, and I think I have this one sitting over here. So I mentioned earlier that there were a couple of lines that are small games. There's the Oink games, there's the Tiny Epic games, but the king of the small games is Button Shy. Button Shy makes tiny card games that are usually 18 cards unless you have an expansion, and they fit into these little plastic, they call them wallets, I guess. Let's go along with it. The one that's probably the highest regarded is Sprawlopolis, and so that's the one I'm going to put down here. But many of their games are very good. I really like Skulls of Sedlec. I like Death Valley. There's a lot of really good Button Shy games. I don't know, they all sort of have their own feel and their own flavor. And I will warn you, not all of them are good. Some of them are, with as many as there are. Come on, we can spell and talk at the same time. There's going to be a few duds, but in general, they're all pretty good. But Sprawlopolis is definitely one of the standouts in the line. Oh, there's a different version. What you're doing in Sprawlopolis is you're working together or playing solo and trying to build a grid of cards. And you build them either by placing cards next to each other or overlapping. And you're trying to form different patterns. So you'll flip over 3 cards at the start of the game, and those 3 cards are going to give you a goal that you're working toward. And then you're trying to get a certain number of points. And the cards are going to tell you how many points you're trying to get. If you beat that number, you win. You're also trying to be efficient to make as few roads as possible, because those cost you points at the end of the game. You're trying to make big groups of one particular type or color. there's a lot going on, but it's a very small footprint game, a short game because there's only 18 cards. I actually remember playing this on a train, on a little tiny train table, like a little pull-out table in between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. So, we played the full game, I think, more than once on that ride, and on a very small table. So that kind of gives you a sense. It's really just going to be a sprawling group of cards, but a great game, and one that I actually don't think I have traveled without for several years now because it's so small. I just always keep it or one of its friends from the Button Shy line in my bag. It's a great game, perfect for traveling. And so with that, let's move on to number 2. All right, my number 2 is one of my other favorite games that I just love to play, and it works so well as a travel game. I remember a very fond memory of sitting on a cruise ship between, it was a small cruise between, I think it was with Tallinn to Stockholm, and just playing this several times while the sun was kind of going down, but not quite because it was in the summer. It was just such a nice experience. I had a great time with it. The game is The Bloody Inn. Now, The Bloody Inn is in a small box, but it's really just a deck of cards and a board with a few components. And what you're doing in this game is using your actions. You've got 2 actions per turn, and you're trying to, well, get the most money. Thematically, you're killing people and burying them in the backyard and then picking their pockets. Mechanically, what you're doing is you are picking up cards of different colors because they're going to make other actions more efficient, and you're trying to be as efficient as possible to make the best use of your actions. It's very simple to play. It works really well. There's a small expansion which fits very nicely inside the box. Not a lot going on here component-wise, but gameplay is just so fascinating. It's based on an old French movie, which I haven't seen because it's in French, and I don't speak French, but you've just got these cards with some weird artwork. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's very stylized. And you can build these people, play these people in a certain way so that you get their special ability, or you can use them for their color up at the top, also in the background. Each color is going to be more efficient at a different action. There's only a few actions in the game, so it's very easy to teach and learn. And it works well solo as well. It's just such a fascinating game, and it works. It's one of the best travel games there is. And in fact, it's my number 2. So obviously, I enjoy it quite a lot. I've talked about it before in other contexts, but in the travel context, it's always one that I think of bringing with me. So there you have it, my number 2 of The Bloody Inn. Let's move on then to my number 1 travel game, which if you've watched the show before won't be a huge surprise, but let's see. All right, so if you've watched our show before, especially the Saturday morning show, this is a game we always talk about because of one very specific play. The game is called Silver, and a Silver is a game, I've got it here, there's actually 4 versions of it, 4 standalone games, and they all fit in one box with some creativity. But it's really just a card game, and so you're going to be shuffling up the cards and dealing them face down. I was going to be finding it here. And you're trying to sort of learn the identity of your cards, and then, well, there we go. Wonder why. You're trying to learn the identity of your cards and then get rid of them through the game's mechanisms. There's a bunch of ways to do so that you have the lowest total value of cards in your little village at the end of the round. And then you play 4 rounds. Whoever has the lowest score is going to be the winner. There's a little bit of memory in there, a lot of take that. It's a very in-your-face game. It doesn't work well solo, but it works really well with 2, 3, or 4 players. All player counts are really good on this. And the rules are simple. The game is small, and we played it once at an airport on the back of a suitcase. So it's obviously a game that travels well, at least for us. It's one that I'm almost always willing to bring with me. It's just so small, so fun, so engaging. And it's unlike anything else. Well, I guess there's one other game that it's like called Cabo that I think it was based on. But either way, this game is a lot of fun. I highly recommend it, especially with its expansions. There's a whole lot of different combinations that can occur. It's just a great time, and it's in such a small box that it's very easy to travel with. So there you have them. Those are my top 10 travel games. I did mention that there are several others, though. I mean, there's so many good games that are in small packages. Now, obviously, if you were going to a convention or something, well, you might have a different idea of what would be an appropriate travel game. In fact, there was a story of when I went to the Dice Tower convention, we had the game Ark Nova, and Ark Nova is by no means a small game, yet we we played it at the airport. We found 2 tables and pushed them together and just had a great time. However, that's more the exception than the rule. This game's quite large and heavy and not generally what you would want to travel with. But hey, depending on what you want to do, that's that. The other game I guess I would mention as a part of my top 10 travel games, and I guess this is my number 0, is a game that you want to give to somebody else. If there's a game that you've enjoyed as much as you plan to, and you want to give it away, taking it with you as a travel game is great because you can give it to that person and play it as well. And then you don't have to bring it back. So you can bring something else back instead. That's a trick I have employed many a time in my life. But either way, I love traveling and I love playing games. And so I almost always have a game with me when I'm traveling. And I'm very likely to have at least one of these 10 games or something similar if you happen to see me and I'm on the road. So I guess I don't have anything more to say on that. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. I hope it will be whimsical for you. And I'm going to let you go now. Have a good night. Okay. Bye-bye.